Well, hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to a special CentreCourt event. We'll call it a Smackdown, Harvard versus Stanford. We have two recent graduates, one from Harvard, one from Stanford. What you need to know, however, is that both of these graduates were accepted at Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. One, you can actually throw in London Business School, incidentally. And one chose Stanford, one chose Harvard. I want to let you know how rare that is. We estimate that roughly 4,500 applicants apply to both schools every year. Only 150 get in. That's basically an acceptance rate of 3.3%. As you know, the general acceptance rate at Harvard is around 12, and at Stanford, it's been around 6 historically. So it is a rare and unique privilege to be accepted to these schools and then to face the difficult choice of where to go. So let me introduce our two guests. The person who chose the Graduate School of Business, Stanford, is Munil Singhai from New Delhi. And she was accepted to Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and London Business School. And then we have Malika Saharia, who went to Harvard Business School and also was accepted to Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. Wow. So let me welcome both of them. So, hey, congratulations. You just graduated. What an exciting finish. I bet both of you are leaving your schools with mixed feelings, meaning I bet both of you would love to have spent another year on the campuses of Harvard and Stanford. Am I right, Manil?
For sure, especially with COVID hitting midway, by the time things really started to open up, towards the end of my business school experience, we were just ready to sort of, stay there longer as we started to realize what we missed out on.
Sure. And Malika, you still wanted to stay at the Boston campus, I bet?
Yeah, I think you're right about that, John. A part of why I chose to stay back in Boston is because of a lot of my classmates deferred. So they'll be coming back this fall to finish their school. So hopefully I get some of the missed business school experience that, they get in person and I enjoy vicariously.
That's great, because I should point out to our audience that Malika is going to stay in Boston. She's accepted a job with McKinsey and Company in their Boston office. So let's start with a little background. Tell us a little bit about your professional background and why you, in fact, chose to pursue an MBA. Manil, why don't you go first?
Sure, I'll start with my background and then jump into why I decided to do an MBA. I started with investment banking with Deutsche Bank. I focused on Asia TMT, and I used to run an education nonprofit on the side. I realized I enjoyed way more than my day job. So I quit and moved to venture philanthropy called CentreCourt Foundation in Delhi, which focused on education. So I spent a few years there before business school, and I was running an accelerator for education enterprises. Where business school fit in was a couple of things. I think I'd sort of been more on the investing side, and I wanted to move to the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem and set myself up for that path, even if not immediately, then down the line. I think also having worked a couple of years, we've all experienced good management, not so good management. And I think I realized that's what really made the difference in my jobs. And it was important to me who I would be as a coach or just like, irrespective of what I was doing, just who I would be as a manager and a mentor. And so I think MBA seemed to be the place to go for that. And in general, I was excited to sort of get a couple of years, get back to learning, have access to sort of the best professors or thought leaders. So yeah, MBA made sense from all those perspectives.
Yep, and that makes sense to me. Malika, what's your story?
Yeah. So on my professional front, I worked with a big Indian conglomerate in corporate strategy and manufacturing operations. So, and I was a chemical engineer before that. So I had a very engineering heavy background, and I see myself going back to India, hopefully being in one of these top leadership positions in an Indian company in the future. But I thought that there's so much that I have to, similar to Monil, that there's so much professional development that's required on the leadership front from me. And I think there's so much that the US has to offer in terms of learnings in any industry for that matter. So that's something that I was looking to explore a bit more. So I think an MBA was a natural next step for me.
Right. And I should point out that you actually worked as an engineer in a beer research laboratory in Germany before
That's right.
going to ITC Limited, the consumer
That's right.
goods giant in India, which is kind of fascinating in and of itself. So how did you figure out which MBA programs to apply to? Obviously, you applied to 3 of the best in the world, both of you. I wonder, did you apply to other schools as well? And what were your initial expectations while you were applying? How much anxiety did you feel, which is a common feeling for most applicants? So give us a sense of that. Manil?
Yeah, no, like MBA is a choice and it's a very, very expensive choice. So, when I was thinking about just justifying that investment, one of the things that you mentioned was just making sure that it's a school where I have access to the best learning in terms of professors, my peer groups, the speakers that I have access to. Like brand was something that I'd heard a lot about, but I wanted to understand what that brand meant. And I realized what it meant was just the people that you could learn from, right? Like the people that I otherwise couldn't access would now be in my classrooms and around me. And so that was the biggest thing. But I think a couple of personal elements were, one, I was coming from a nonprofit background. And so schools with the best financial aid was very, very important to me. Another thing was I wanted to come back to India, similar to what Malika mentioned. And so schools that would have a strong community back home, or just globally, apart from their footprint in the US, was important as well. And lastly, I think I was just US inclined compared to Europe, because I wanted schools that were attached to a university, so I could access other courses and other interests and not just business. So yeah, I think that sort of drew me to Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton. And my partner was in London, so there was a personal inclination. So I also applied for London Business School.
Right, great. And Malika, how about you?
Yeah, I think Monil's covered a lot of what I was just going to say. But apart from that, I think the diversity in the student body as well was something that was very important to me. So apart from looking at all of what Monil said, I also had a particular interest in looking at how well represented the rest of the world is in each of these business schools.
Right. Now, Malika, how did you decide between, well, I could even add Wharton into the picture, because frankly, there would be reasons to also go to Wharton, but how did you decide that the place for you really was Harvard?
Great question. I think just to preface what I'm just about to say, and not to trivialize any of my decision-making process, at the time of applying, I think there was always a dream school that everyone has in mind, like if I get in, this is where I want to be. And that for me was Harvard from the very beginning. Apart from that, I think when I was thinking about, as Monil said, like I also want to go back to India, how well represented the community is, how well recognized the brand is. And another very interesting thing about, interesting point that one of the alumni highlighted to me was, we talk about small class size versus big class size. And at HBS, your section consists of around 90 students. And while you make 90 very good friends, like the rest of the 1,000 students are like just a second degree connection away. And it's not a loose association, it's a pretty strong association. And especially that, along with the Indian cohort being very well represented in the batch, was something that was very exciting for me to think about as I was, deciding between business schools. So this was, I think, one factor that made a big difference. In terms of everything else, like weather, there are so many factors that I considered. There was weather, there was the financial aid, which was need-based, so it was roughly the same across both schools for me. There was like the focus on industries. I think you can't go wrong between Stanford and Harvard. Like the tech, of course, proximity with the GSB was something that was very interesting. But given my goals and given HBS being known for its legacy general management courses and my future career in India, I think Harvard made more sense for me from that point of view.
Now, being an engineer, I wonder if you took an engineer's approach to your decision. In other words, did you lay it all out in linear fashion? Here's the pros, here's the cons, here's my Excel spreadsheet, and this is how I'm going to help myself make this decision? Or was it more of a gut kind of thing based on the factors that you just cited?
I did make out like this engine, and I did make out make a spreadsheet out. I did consider all of these. I tried weighing in different parameters that I thought were more relevant for me. But I think in the end, it was a combination of like the main factor of the student body size, as well as or the class strength, as well as my gut feeling of, you know, Harvard always being my dream school that made the decision for me.
Right. Manil, obviously you graduated from Stanford, so you chose it over Harvard. Tell me why.
I think I'd like to start by saying what Malika said. I think there's always a dream school, and mine was probably Stanford from the beginning. But I think that everybody I spoke to sort of said you can't go wrong with this decision. So all of the things that in terms of industries and courses and resources are probably very similar. By the way, that was very useless advice, did not help at all. But I think the two things that stood out for me and why I chose Stanford was one, just the culture of the place. Everybody I spoke to, like there was this concern that I also had about like smaller numbers, smaller network or whatever. And everybody I spoke to spoke about so much more than just their professional networks. People spoke about finding their best friends. People spoke about finding their housemates, finding their co-founders, people they invested in. Or if you talk about Stanford to people, the things that come up the first is something, the course called touchy-feely or the talk. So there was, it's, you know, there's like a hallmark culture of how it's based on building deep relationships and really thinking about who you are in those relationships. And I think that really resonated with me. It aligned with why I wanted to do business school in the first place. And then maybe professionally, I think there is this ethos of entrepreneurship in general, and not just tech, but being close to the Valley, the VC investing, impact investing ecosystem. It's just this place where taking risks and doing crazy things is encouraged. And I think it aligned with me professionally as well.
And did you actually lay out the pros and cons of each school as well to make your decision, or how did you actually go about that, your process?
I think it was a bit of a pendulum. It was less a list, but there would be conversations and I'd speak to persuasive, incredible people from both sides. And so it was like one day my emotional chart was somewhere, another day it was somewhere else. So it was, yeah, I think it was like the feeling that won out in the end and not.
Yeah, which also speaks to how difficult the decision is. In right, there is no wrong decision. You can't go wrong picking Harvard or Stanford on any day of the week. And to have the privilege of doing that is just remarkable. So I wonder, you know, if you can share 3 highlights of your time in the program that are experiences you think you might not have had elsewhere. Malika, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think people, the conversations, the continuing conversations from outside of classes on a lot of topics that were pretty intense were eye-opening. Like I just learned so many different ways of thinking about a problem that I had a very myopic view on to come in with. So I think that was something that was just, I don't think I'd get that anywhere else. Maybe Stanford. Then professors, I think I found so many good mentors and such valuable life advice in terms of how to think about my future and everything. So that was something that was a big highlight for me. And lastly, I think a lot of these courses, like the legacy courses that HBS is just known for, I just wish I could go back to school and attend some of the other courses that I just couldn't get just because of luck or just because of the way lottery works and things like that. There's so many courses that just blew my mind, and I wish I could go back and audit some of them if possible.
Yeah. Now, you know, one of the interesting things when I listened to you is that you never said that I chose Harvard because of the case study method, which of course Harvard invented and is well known for. And it's not like there are plenty of case study classes at Stanford, but it's thought that the teaching style is a little more varied at Stanford than it would be at Harvard. Did the case study method have any kind of special allure to you, Malika?
I think going in, I didn't have the privilege of attending a class remote or in person. I was in India, so I couldn't go for the ASW, the admit weekend. So I really didn't know what the atmosphere was like. But I think in retrospect, it's electric. It's really intense, and it's really it makes you uncomfortable to the extent that opens your mind. Like I think in retrospect, I think it's very big. I really missed it when we went online from like being offline, and that's I think a big pull that HBS. I think that's a course, like the way of style of teaching that HBS has really mastered for majority of the courses. And in retrospect, yes, I think that's something that really stood out to me over my 2 years.
Right.
I think COVID just changed the overall expectation from the MBA and what I take away from it. But yeah, like my time horizon over the past 2 years have blurred to also incorporate COVID as a significant part of my experience. So I think when you mentioned that, like case, that seems like the case method seems like such a long time ago.
Right. Manil, what were the 3 highlights of your time at Stanford?
It's a hard one to follow because I think Malika definitely spoke about things that I think were highlights for me. So I'll try to be a little bit more specific. The first, I think that personally for me was a highlight with this program called the Arbuckle Leadership Fellows. About a 4th or 8th of a class does the program. It's an extension of the course Touchy-Feely, and you really learn about how you build relationships, how you coach people, who you are. And I think I just built some of the most incredible relationships and of my time, and learned professionally, but also who I am as a friend or who I am as a partner. So I think that was a very transformative experience for me. Another experience I think is people, but also just living together. So at Stanford in the first year, we're all living together in the same set of dorms. It's a group of 400 people. We have platforms like the WIM circles, or we give talks where we share our life stories. So just that experience, it's, I think, just 10x's or 100x's all the kind of conversations you can have when you live together in that kind of environment, almost a bubble of our own. And I think the last one, I'll pick a specific course, which was the Startup Garage, where you can I worked with undergrads and I could try a startup. And I wasn't intending on maybe going through with it full time, but just having the safe space, having the professors, having access to a community that lets you try out all your crazy ideas, I think was just amazing.
Now, I know one of the hallmarks of the Stanford program is the opportunity to speak your narrative to your classmates. And I forget what it's called. Manil, what is it called?
It's called the talk.
That's right. Now, tell us what it means and how it brings classmates close to each other.
The talk is essentially a weekly ritual where 2 people spend about half an hour, 40 minutes sharing their life story with the entire class. But it's not something you can get on a CV or LinkedIn. It's not professional. It's the most deep, vulnerable version of themselves. And so it's a privilege for the rest of us to get to hear that or to be able to participate in that. And I think there's a process as a speaker, and I went through it. There's a lot of coaching that you get. And there's a lot of reflection that happens in formulating what my story is and how I would communicate it to someone. But there's also so much learning that happens as a listener, like people you would have made assumptions about based on how they look or where they come from or what they've achieved. Mm-hmm. And when you hear their story, it's happy, it's heartbreaking, it's so many things. And it feeds into this culture of like being really open and vulnerable and authentic and creating that space.
Yes, I mean, there's a real intimacy to those talks. I've seen some of them, and they're quite compelling, really. Yeah. Is there a similar kind of thing at Harvard, Malika?
Yeah, there is. The name just lapsed, but yeah, I think we have that. So we have something very similar at Harvard, where weekly, or I think it's based on whenever someone is free or wants to open up and share their stories with their classmates. There's a community, it's called My Takes. Sorry, that's the name. So it's a class My Takes or a community My Takes. You can choose to share your story with your classmates. You can choose to share your story with the entire student body, or the entire class. And it's everything that Monal said, as in, you don't, like, there's so many identities that every person brings in. And what you see is their best selves, like professionally or in a classroom or even as friends, you see their best selves. And what has gone behind making the person that they are today, it's so eye-opening. I think it feeds, as Monal said, it feeds into the culture of empathy, building empathy as a future leader, as a partner, as a friend, or just as a person when you're talking to someone, like, not judging them by how they are at the moment, like recognizing there's so much more to learn from them beyond like the knowledge, professional or personal knowledge that they bring in. I think that was really powerful. Like all the class takes, my takes that I heard were moving in their own way, like happy stories, sad stories, powerful stories. And I think it gives you so much strength as a person, I think, even when you think about adversities that you might face.
Now, Malika, you noted earlier that because you were in India, you didn't have the opportunity to visit both campuses or even one campus to help make your decision. Monil, were you able to visit either campus or not?
No, same situation.
Wow, that's amazing. So you had to actually make these decisions without setting foot on either campus. Now, let me ask you another question. Were the two of you, have you ever been in the United States before coming here for graduate school? Monil?
I had when I was really young.
Yeah, and Monil?
I had been before. I'd done a summer program in my high school once. So I'd been there, yeah.
So what was it like, Malika, to come for the first time? I'm wondering, what were some of the issues that you may have encountered in the transition? Because it's a difficult transition, number one, just to enter a rigorous MBA program, and particularly the core curriculum where so much material is being thrown at you and you're trying to get to know your classmates. Meantime, you have the cultural differences that you have to address as well. What was it like?
I want to say it was difficult, but in retrospect, I think not so much, because I guess coming in for an MBA program, or for that matter as a student, there's so much comfort around you. There's so many people who can help you, navigate your way, and you're not embarrassed to ask for help. It also helps that I knew a few people from India coming into HBS, and I had like a small friend circle there was a lot of comfort in knowing that I was not alone in going through all the stress that I was as a first year MBA student. And as I opened up with my classmates at HBS, I think I realized that almost everyone was going through some way like everyone was having difficulties adjusting to this culture shift. It's, I guess, as an international student, you face a host of new challenges, as you talked about, understanding what's the right way of communicating to people, understanding cultural nuances, things that are appropriate to say, not appropriate to say, things like that. But it's a bigger challenge is the shift of mindset from being a working professional to an MBA student. I think that everyone, irrespective of where they're from, faces like the pressure of being in a classroom, the pressure of academics that HBS has. So if there was a lot of comfort in knowing that a lot of us, irrespective of where we came from, were navigating these challenges together, and like the problems were very similar.
Right, exactly. And obviously there's tremendous support. I mean, you're by going to these schools, they offer resources and they have tremendous experience in assimilating people from all over the world. So I think that helps a great deal as well. Manil, did you find the transition challenging in any way, or not really?
No, I definitely, I think similar to what Malika said, at that time, it definitely felt challenging. In retrospect, not so much.
Yes.
I think there's one, of course, like I did not know anybody even from India going in. And so it was just an entirely new place for me, and the little things are different, right? Like just your day-to-day functioning is different. It's not about just school, but like how you get groceries, how you set up your house, how your card works, how your phone works. So I think just adjusting to the new environment and then shifting to this mind space of being ready for school, especially in a quarter system at Stanford. So it moves very fast. So it feels like a lot, but I think there were resources to sort of help get through that. One, I think Malika's also mentioned this, is that we all start with a section system. So, you have a landing base, you have a group of people who are your people, you see them every day, there are structures around that. So you find your initial community. I think that was really helpful. Stanford has this thing called an academic adjustment period. So for the first 6 weeks, there's nothing else other than just assimilating. There's no recruiting, there's no clubs, they don't unleash anything else on us. And I think I didn't fully appreciate it then, but in retrospect, I really, really I'm grateful that that space was there. And in a non-COVID time, there used to be trips. So there used to be trips before GSP started, during, and by December, everybody would have traveled with their classmates. And I think that's sort of the best way to find community and really get together. So I'm hoping that the future classes have that.
Absolutely. So the big question for a lot of people who will be watching this is, how did you do it? How did you get into all three of these schools? We all know that folks from India are often in the most oversubscribed applicant pool in elite MBA admissions, because there's so many people in India who want to go to an elite American business school. So just because of the numbers alone, the odds are kind of against you. So if you had advice for current applicants about the application process, what would it be? Malika?
Yeah, good question. I don't know how I made it. Like, I think if I cast a net that's wide enough and, in a sense, good enough for me to calm my nerves down so I can present my best self when I get my interview invites, I think that's something that really helps. And of course, preparation. I spoke to a lot of friends and colleagues who had made it to these schools in the past, and that was really helpful to understand their perspective on what helped. So knowing someone who's been there and getting their perspective on the application process before you start out, I think is invaluable advice. Beyond that, I think budgeting time to really focus on your application and giving time for maybe unforeseen circumstances at work and your personal life is something I think that's important, because it's a very expensive process in itself, like the application process. And if things go wrong, you don't have a lot of shot, like in terms of how you've thought about your life beyond MBA as well. So I think these two things were really useful when starting out on my application process. Beyond that, I think I took help from my consultant, Admissions Gateway. I think Monil also worked with them. Rajdeep, who I worked with, was really helpful on that front, on helping me handicap my odds at different schools, or even guiding me on how to go about writing essays or who to get recommendations from, these small day-to-day things that are very important to your application, but you really don't know how to navigate. I think so. Working with a consultant was also something that I personally found very useful, given my background coming into the application process.
I should also point out, and incidentally, both Manil and Malika were profiled by Poets and Quants, and you can look up those profiles, which actually appeared before they set foot on these campuses, but after they were admitted. That Malika studied for 3 weeks, I believe, for the GMAT, scored a 750 on the first try, which just makes me, totally in awe of you, because I hate standardized tests. And I could never in my whole life, if my life depended on it, score a 750 on the GMAT.
So in retrospect, I say I was really lucky, but I really got busy at work. There were some unfortunate circumstances back home that required me, that really took up a lot of this time. So I got lucky, I would say, but if I had to do it again, I'd probably not operate in such a panic mode.
But it worked. What advice would you have for current applicants?
just to add on, I think one, I would do a big +1 on just researching the schools really well. And I don't mean like just websites, but talk to people, talk to alumni, whatever you can find basically. And I think, and consultants are helpful there as well. And I think really reflecting that in your applications, just not just because it's you're assessing what's the right fit, but because I think the schools really care if you can truly succeed there, if it's not just the brand, but you've really made a thoughtful decision about where you want to be and why you belong there. So I think that makes a difference. And then the second thing I would say is, this is generic, but I believe that people should over-index on their stories. I have so many people who ask me what should be their answer to what matters most to you when they get stuck up on that one-word answer, or what they should say would be their future goal, which would sound cool and differentiated. But as you said, like thousands of people apply every year, and it's impossible to come up with one answer that the admissions committee hasn't seen. But I think the unique thing is our stories and why we did the things we did, or, so I would say just really outside of the essay questions, like think about your story, think about the things that really what shaped you, and then you'd get all your essay answers, I think, from there.
Now, Manil, how far in advance of your application deadline did you start working on the application?
It's hard to say. There were different milestones. Like there's a milestone of like confirming whether you would use a consultant or who you would go with. I think that was maybe, and taking the GMAT. I think I did those in April. And then it was quiet for a while. Then June end, I think I realized there was a Dhirubhai deadline. So I was active for a few days and then went quiet again. And maybe July or August really was where I spent the bulk of the time on my essays.
Right. And then you applied round one?
I applied round one and I applied to the 4 schools.
Right.
I was very clear on round one. I wanted to ideally be able to take a 6-month break before business school to do random things in life. So.
Great. Malika, what was your time frame?
I think very similar to Monal's.
Yeah.
By April, I made those decisions on, I got done with my GMAT early, around, I think, March or early April, and then deciding on whether to go forward with a consultant or not. And then what schools, similar to Monal, I wanted a break from working. So I also applied to Harvard, Wharton, and Stanford in round one. And then leaving some space for maybe a few more schools in round 2 in case these didn't work out.
Right. Well, they clearly worked out. So just one last question for both of you. Manil, what are you going to miss most about Stanford?
This is a raw one. It feels very present. I think if I have to pick one, 2 things maybe. One, the people. I think we've already spoken about that. I've some of my closest friends, my mentors, just even like the people who I don't know, but like the random run-ins and interesting conversations that you could have on a place like the Stanford campus where everybody lives together and it's always beautiful and energetic. And second, I think the energy of the place. I don't know if it's because it's in the valley or because the valley, however it feeds into the whole thing, but there's this whole vibe and ethos around the place of taking a risk, following your heart, really, not going on the traditional path, and I think that's celebrated and appreciated, and everybody pushes each other up. And I think that kind of energy and ambition, I would really miss having that around me all the time.
Great. Malika, even though you're going to hang out in Boston and maybe even connect with those deferred classmates, what are you going to miss most about Harvard Business School?
I think I couldn't have put it any better than how Monal did. It's definitely the people plus the energy, like being surrounded at once by so many talented people doing so many cool and exciting things that really drives you and like just lets you think, pause, question what you're doing and what you want to do in life. Like, I don't think I'll get that time, the energy, and the people all at once together again.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a really special experience, obviously, to go to a Harvard or to a Stanford. And the people you meet, the conversations you have, the friends you make will be memorable and last a lifetime. So, hey, congratulations to the two of you. I don't even know both of you, but I'm so proud of the two of you for having what you've accomplished. It's quite something, and I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. So thank you, Manil and Malika. Good luck to you in your future.
Thanks, John, and congrats, Malika.
Yeah. Thanks, John, for having us. Yeah, and congrats, Moonlil. Hope to bump into you soon.
Well, you two, I have a feeling you two are going to connect somehow. All right, you've been watching our Smackdown with two incredible people who have just graduated from two of the best schools in the world, bar none, and were accepted to both, made a big decision, and seem to be quite happy with the decisions that they made. So this is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. You've been watching our CentreCourt Smackdown. Thanks.